Woo! Man. Yeah, if you can't tell, I'm pretty happy with how week one went. And I think you already know where I'm going to start with this week's breakdown. Florida State versus Alabama. And man, does it feel good to be right about this one. I mean, everybody, I'm talking every single analyst that I watched picked against Florida State. But my gut told me not to listen, and thank goodness because I nailed this pick, and it feels so good, man. Florida State didn't just win; they dominated. This was not a fluke win. Everything I said in my preseason prediction, it came true. Thomas Castellanos at quarterback, dude talked his trash. He backed it up. He was electric. Add in Gus Malzahn at OC, Tony White at DC, and this staff is different, man. It went from being a 2-10 team to just bullying Alabama up front. They owned the ground game. The defense held very strong. Alabama just had no answers. And now Alabama's new quarterback, he did show some flashes here, more athletic than I expected him to be, but he was under duress all night long. And all the hype around Ryan Grubb coming in at OC for Alabama, honestly, I thought he called a pretty poor game. Supposedly the best O-line in the country. They got pushed around. After the first drive, they rushed for just 29 yards the rest of the night. It was just absolutely brutal, and they were just really inconsistent, and they lacked an identity, honestly. Ryan Williams, he wasn't a factor here, and dare I say, he's a little overrated. And this is not just a week one overreaction. I kind of started to feel that way about him at the end of last season. And don't even get me started on how bad Alabama's defense looked under Womack. Yeesh. They were on skates all night long, and they just looked so unprepared, man. And I got to call this out, too, because I saw Kalen DeBoer on the sideline looking like a deer in the headlights. He had zero energy, no fire, no coaching presence. Meanwhile, you look at the Georgia game, and Kirby Smart's throwing his headset down when Georgia's up 45-7. So it's night and day difference here. It looks like he doesn't even care. I know he does, but it looks like he doesn't even care. And yes, Alabama did have some guys out in this game. There were some injuries. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but bottom line is Florida State looked more prepared. They looked more passionate. They looked better coached, and they had a clear identity, which Alabama just didn't have. They looked flat, uninspired, and just dead on arrival. It's a statement win, and it is just so good to see my Noles back, baby. And now, I mean, I don't know what this means for either team. Maybe Florida State is, that good. Maybe Alabama is just that bad. Personally, I'm hoping both are true. But I know as an FSU fan, I'm feeling pretty good, especially after last season. It's good to see them be a competitor again, and I could not be happier that they got this win here. And yes, I am going to be keeping this on for the whole video, so get used to it. I'm going to pull it up here. But, yeah. Anyways, let's move on now to one of the other really big games of the week. Not the one I thought I was going to be talking about here, because honestly I thought Ohio State Texas was going to come first, but that's not how the cards played. I mean, I'll talk about that game in a little bit, but I have to talk about Clemson versus LSU next, and I'll own this one. I was wrong. I thought Clemson's returning production and home field advantage would give them the edge here, but LSU, they showed up ready. Their two weaknesses from last season were their run game and their defense, and I told y'all in my preseason predictions that I thought LSU had addressed those issues, but I definitely didn't expect it to show up this soon in week one. Blake Baker's defense shut down the run. The secondary held firm. The O-line opened up lanes for Caden Durham, who had himself an absolute night. The pass game was a little rough to start, and LSU actually had to lean on that run game, which is something that would have been a death sentence last season, but not anymore. Caden Durham, like I said, he crushed it. And in the second half, when the pass game, really started going, LSU showed off that they had some explosive receivers. And by the way, they got robbed of a touchdown as well on one of the worst calls that I've seen. Just had to point that out because LSU deserved to have an extra score here because they earned that one. And look, Clemson was not bad by any means. Klubnik was really solid. The receivers looked a lot better. The defense definitely hung in there, but they just had zero run game, which forced them to be one-dimensional. And at the end of the day, LSU was the better team in every phase. But for Clemson, this isn't the end of the world for them, honestly. It's not a conference game, and they're still very much in playoff contention, though Florida State might have something to say about that, at least in their conference. For LSU, though, this is huge. You finally won a season opener, and you looked really balanced and a dangerous team here. The SEC is going to have to take notice here because LSU looks like the team that I picked them to be in the preseason. Remember, I said that they were going to be the number one team in the SEC. People didn't agree with me, but it's looking like a pretty good pick right now. We'll see, but I like how that's looking right now. Moving on now to Ohio State versus Texas, an absolute snooze fest in Columbus. I had this game up so much. I think a lot of people did, and we all got burned because this game was not what we expected it to be. Yes, it was a close game, but defense rolled. Texas didn't even score through 3 quarters. It was a complete shutout for 3 quarters, and neither offense really looked all that sharp. Arch Manning, tons of offseason hype, but he looked lost, inaccurate, flustered, couldn't find a rhythm. To be fair, Texas receivers were slow. They looked slow at least. And Ohio State secondary took full advantage of that. They locked them down completely. Texas did run the ball okay, but they just couldn't cash it in the end zone, or in the red zone, I mean. On the other side, Julian Sayin didn't light it up on the stat sheet either, but he played smarter. He didn't have any turnovers. He made good decisions. He was calm under pressure, and it wasn't flashy, but it got the job done here. And I already talked about Ohio State's defense locking down Texas, but Texas did the same thing to Ohio State. Both of these defenses looked incredible and should give both quarterbacks time to get more comfortable in their system later down the line, but both teams absolutely have some stuff to work on, especially on offense. I think it's clear that they are both missing their weapons that they had last year, but I think both teams will look very different in a few weeks. This is such a huge win for Ryan Day, though. After losing both coordinators and replacing so many guys and winning a national championship, a game like this is supposed to cut you down to size, but they did the opposite. That's not an easy thing to do, and so props to Ohio State and props to Ryan Day. As much as I dislike you guys, I got to give you guys your flowers because that was a solid win. Now let's talk about Auburn versus Baylor, and I'll admit it, I doubted Auburn here, but they proved me wrong. Jackson Arnold, he looked like an obvious upgrade at quarterback just by not turning the ball over, to be honest. He ran smart. He managed the game well. But I am a little skeptical still that we didn't see him pass the ball too much because he really didn't have to. But he will have to against some teams in the future. So we'll have to wait and see if he delivers when that time comes. Auburn's offensive line looked as advertised. The running backs may not be Jarquez Hunter, but they can definitely carry the load when necessary. They had like 3 dudes average over 5 yards per carry. It's not all sunshine and rainbows for Auburn, though. Defense let Sawyer Robinson throw all over them. This obviously has to be something that's fixed. The scary part is that it looked like they just didn't have the personnel that they needed to play this style of defense that they wanted to. And if they don't adjust, that could really hurt them in the future. As for Baylor, the offense looked good. Robertson was sharp, and Trigg looked dangerous. And the weapons are definitely there. But defensively, Dave Aranda is supposed to be this kind of defensive guru, but he just never adjusted. Auburn was able to just continue to pound the rock, playing the same things, and Baylor just never adapted to it. I still think they are in very good shape for their conference, though. I'm not selling on Baylor yet, but they have some work to do. And for Auburn, this was a really good win against a solid Power 4 opponent. They needed that one. There are just some adjustments I think that need to be made, especially on defense, but you got to be pretty happy if you're an Auburn fan to get this win starting 1-0 in the season. Next, I got to talk about Tennessee versus Syracuse, and I nailed this one. I told y'all Tennessee, they were going to roll, and they did. Joey Aguilar looked perfect in Heupel's system. No interceptions, efficient passing, and the run game was dominant. Heupel's offensive system is alive and well. So all the concerns about Aguilar's ball security, losing the best receivers, losing their star running back, may have been put to ease a little bit. But let's pump the brakes just a tad because Tennessee has a history of looking invincible early and then falling apart in big games later down the line. It's like I cautioned in the preseason, Tennessee fans. I know it's a big win. I know you guys feel good, but be careful with your expectations because it's still early, and there were some glaring concerns here about this team. For one, they gave up 7 explosive plays and 26 points to Syracuse. Now, maybe Syracuse has a great offense, which is very possible under Fran Brown. I like him a lot, but they also lost a lot of their key weapons, and it's just something to keep an eye on. Defense might need to tighten up there in the secondary, but time will tell. For now, though, they should feel really, really good. It looks like they got the right guy at quarterback, while the guy that left for UCLA, he looked pretty bad. Maybe Nico leaving was really better for the team, which I didn't think I was going to be saying, but I did say that Aguilar was going to be a good quarterback, and a lot of people were underestimating him, and I think that's going to be the case. At the end of the day, Tennessee had the better players and the better depth in this game. Syracuse is still rebuilding and finding their identity, and Tennessee, it looks like they didn't drop off as much as people expected them to. Just don't crown them yet. Now let's talk about Georgia Tech versus Colorado, and this one was closer than it should have been. Georgia Tech came out the gate shaky, turning the ball over 3 times in the first 7 minutes of the game, and they were all on good drives too, and somehow they only gave up 3 points off of them, which is a huge testament to that defense who bowed up and minimized the damage there. This game was honestly kind of head-scratching to me because Georgia Tech would put together these great drives and just wasn't able to cash them into points. But once they settled in, they were clearly the better team here. Haynes King at quarterback and Jamal Haynes at running back gave them their expected run-heavy attack. And like I said, defense was really good at minimizing the damage, holding Colorado. Colorado really impressed me, though. They didn't have Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders or any of the other production from last season, but they were able to shift identities and look more cohesive, which is something I actually predicted in my preseason Big 12 rankings, so make sure to go check me on that one if you want to. The ground game was better than it's been since Deion Sanders got there, and Caden Salter made some really good plays, although I did feel like he bailed from the pocket a little too quickly at times. On defense, they looked pretty solid in the trenches, honestly. For a team most people thought would fall off a cliff, they look like a legit Big 12 team, and Georgia Tech, they got the win, but I think both teams showed something here. Now let's move on to South Carolina versus Virginia Tech. I picked South Carolina to win this game, even though I knew they came with some glaring holes at running back and wide receiver. My thought process was pretty simple. They have a quarterback that can put the team on his back and a defense that can be very disruptive against a Virginia Tech squad that, has its own issues and a turnover-prone, high-upside quarterback. And honestly, that's exactly how it played out. South Carolina's lack of a ground game was pretty obvious here, and outside of Nick Harbor, they really didn't have any reliable receiving options either. This is not a team that's stacked with weapons like last season, but it really didn't matter because Lenore Sellers is that guy. He can run, he can throw, he's tough to bring down, and South Carolina needed a play. He delivered. Still, without help around him, sustaining drives was a real challenge here, especially against the Virginia Tech defense that gave them some problems up front. Thankfully for the Gamecocks, the defense, was able to step up. They flat out stonewalled Virginia Tech for long stretches of this game and added a touchdown on special teams as well, which ended up being huge. On the other side, Virginia Tech honestly mirrored South Carolina in a lot of ways. They've got a quarterback who can do everything, but their offensive weapons are limited, and they relied on a strong defense to keep them in this game. The difference was mistakes. Kyron Drones made more of them. The offensive line just couldn't hold off South Carolina's pass rush. And to their credit, I was impressed with Tech's passing game at times. You got Aiden Green, who, made some incredible catches, as well as some other receivers that were contested. But at the end of the day, this game felt pretty much dead even. It just came down to momentum swings and turnovers, and South Carolina capitalized. Now, I'm quickly going to talk about Utah versus UCLA. It's not one that I broke down in my prediction, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. Just a quick thing here. Utah looks back. Kyle Whittingham has these guys rolling again. Devin Dampier was automatic at quarterback, and UCLA looked completely outclassed. Nico just is not ready to elevate them. In fact, like I said, Nico looked pretty pitiful. Big 12, though, you got to watch out for Utah. They look legit, and they might be my favorite now to win the Big 12. I'm gonna hold on that, but they looked really dang good. And last but not least, I have to talk about Notre Dame versus Miami, and this was an incredible game and a legitimate win for Miami. I know I clowned on Miami a lot last season for some fluke wins, but unlike last year, this was not about luck or bad calls. The Canes earned this one. Carson Beck looked like he was in 2023 form, and even without their top 6 receivers from last season, Miami's passing attack held up pretty well. A couple of their wideouts made some, highlight reel catches, and the run game was just good enough to keep Notre Dame honest. But the real story was the defense. A year ago, it was Miami's Achilles heel. This time, the defensive line limited Notre Dame's run game very effectively. They got consistent pressure, and the secondary looked miles better. As for Notre Dame, they showed a lot to like. CJ Carr in his first start settled in pretty well, and he showed some real flashes, especially as the game went on. I was a little surprised at how long it took them to get Jeremiah Love involved, because once he finally was involved, he completely changed the energy of this game. That's when the Irish rallied. They tied the game in the fourth quarter, and then their defense held Miami to 4 straight 3-and-outs, which was, partly because Miami was playing conservative, but also because Notre Dame was playing really well. And I can't help but to think, though, if Love was more involved earlier on, Notre Dame would be walking out of this game with a win. But I'm not going to question Notre Dame's staff too much because I get the feeling there might have been some kind of injury or something going on, because I have a hard time believing that they would keep their best player off the field for so much of this game for no reason. Anyways, turnovers told the story at the end of the day here. Notre Dame had 2, Miami had none, and in the end, the Canes made the key plays and proved they may not be the frauds this year they were last year. Time will tell, but this was definitely a statement win for Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes. Anyways, that's all for today's video, guys. Week 1 is already shaking things up. Let me know in the comments which team impressed you the most and which one has the most to prove going forward. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and it's going to be a wild season, man. Peace.